Okay, I think we can start. So, hello, welcome to the morning session at Devox. My name is Adam Bin, freelancer, working with Java from the beginning, still enjoying it really. What happened the last few years, I also have to build sometimes front ends, and so this talk will be split into two parts, what I do in backend and what I do in front end, just as an idea. And this is mostly what happens also in projects, in my projects. This is a session without slides, or not with too many slides, so I would appreciate if you have questions. So if you have questions, just ask me. And freelancer, I really enjoy Java. I have a blog, more or less a notepad, and recently 1 year, I think, so even a podcast where I interview people when I have no time to meet them at conferences. And why is still not crazy, I think, so I started with Java in 1997, and I always focus on standards, something which does not change a lot. So for back then we were called standards, now we could also call it standards. I do the same in web, and it really paid off, not only for me, for my clients. There were no migration, and I learned once and never again. So the only challenge is, if you stick with technology for a longer time, is not to forget things. So you will have to refresh your knowledge, but you don't have to relearn, complete something different if you don't like to. Okay, so now, and there's of course some online workshops. For this, the only interesting part is the Airhacks TV. This is the first Monday of the month. I'm answering questions live. You don't even have to register, just ask the question as a gist on GitHub. Why I'm doing this? Because the deal is I'm not answering emails anymore, which is for me a very good deal. And people like it as well. We're already, I think, 50 episodes, so it's for 4 years is running. It's somehow popular. And some workshops in Munich, and this was the last slide. So the question is, why Miniservices? So someone asked me yesterday, and as you can see, there was from Gartner a paper. I think you have to pay to download this, but already this is interesting, and I got asked by someone what my opinion to Miniservices is. And this actually is interesting here to say, find microservices architecture is too disruptive for their organization, so they should investigate miniservices instead, which is pretty cool. So if miniservices are too disruptive, just rename the thing to miniservice and it would be going to be less disruptive. And what also cool is comparison of miniservices with microservices and macroservices. So I think next year I could offer you a session with exactly the same code, but with the title macroservices, for instance. This is, by the way, also my strategy. So I know 10 years ago, SOA was big. So I did exactly the same what I do today and call it SOA. Then I call it mini-services, or macroservices, or whatever services will come. But the most important thing is focus on business logic, forget the noise, and write as little code as possible. So this is the only remaining, keep the code base simple. Okay, so this is the title of the session, and the web standards is actually more reasonable. And what I understand under web standards is this what the browsers are providing, and this is what you find under can I use. If you go here to can I use, you will find a page, and you can check capabilities like, for instance, fetch, which I will show you. And if it's available on all browsers, it's a kind of web standard. And this is what we do in larger projects in the front end. So we focus more on web standards and don't use too many frameworks anymore. The question, why not? Because at least my clients are sick of migrating from one framework to another. They would like to implement something for business and not necessarily migrating back and forth frameworks. So, but now let's start with the backend. Again, if you have questions, ask. So what I intend to do is to implement a mini-service, macro-service, nano-service, or whatever service. But this service will expose HTTP with JSON, and then use it from the front end. So this is the idea. And of course, answer your questions. So be loud. I can't see you properly. So if you have questions, just ask me. So what I do usually, I still use Maven. Why Maven? Everyone knows Maven, and is good and fast enough. And what I'm doing right now, I'm creating a archetype. And of course, what is hot these days in Krakow? Everyone is interested in, of course, what? Dragons, right? So Krakow is the Dragon City. So I actually talked to organizers. So Devoc's name is a little bit lame. Should be DragonConf or something like this. So let's do a Dragon service. So we have the dragon, and I tried to investigate, but I actually don't know what the name of the dragon is, except this is a dragon, and whether it was evil or a good dragon. So this is also left for investigation next year. So what happened? I just have a bin XML, and this bin XML says dependency injection everywhere, and this is what we start the projects. And I have here a ping service which I used for cloud native deployment. And why? Because if you have something like Kubernetes, it usually would like to have a liveness and readiness probes. And what it basically means, you would like to have a defined context, a ping or probe or whatever, which is the same for all services. This was my way in Java to do this. Now we can actually improve it a bit. So let's do something. I would create in the app called Dragons probe boundary and call that, let's do this here, and liveness. And so it will create a class, of course, and the class extends health check and health check, not health check, sorry, implements. Did I say implements? Implements health check. This is what I wanted, not extends. And I will have to implement one method. So what I would like to do. So let's do this. And this thing says, okay, return health check response, and Dragon is up, hopefully not, and additional data, addition with data, and fire is hot, so Dragon is alive. And let's say I build that, right? And I also have to use, say here, health. So cool. So let's try that. So I would like to run it, and for me it's important, actually not for me, rather for my clients. They would like to use stock servers. So some projects are using Glassfish or now Payara 5. The others are Whitefly. WebSphere is not that used often. What we use more often is OpenLiberty and Tommy. So this is what is used in production. And the cool story is I can go to health, and I have my health check. So the interesting part is the health check is a top level. It has nothing to do with my app. So for the automation process in my projects, I can rely on a common context URI, which is the added value of that. So I could write it by myself, but the added value is actually that all my services has health, and I can have one Kubernetes probe configuration for all my microservices. So this is a little added value. You have questions, of course, ask me. So in a second, I do some more and then explain you the relation of Jakarta E micro profile and all other profiles and communities, okay? But if not, re-ask the question, because I would like, the next step, I would like to hack something, and then we can discuss that. So, and what we also need is, we need dragons. Oh, what is the home of the dragon? The tunnel. How it's called? Like this? Boundary, it's a tunnel, and then we need dragons resource. And this is dragons. And let's say keep it simple first, because I need another class. And this is like string get, and I actually forgot to look up what was the name of the dragon in Krakow. You know, what was the name? Like Duke, Willy, or I don't know, Hans? Oh man, how it's called? Walski. So we have the Monsieur Walski, So, and this should, of course, this will be way too simple. This is a microservice. What do you need a mini service to be less disruptive? So we need the layer here, and the layer would be application scoped, for instance. Why that? It's a singleton, and just do this with the Valsky here. So string get name or investigate name. Investigate name. Why investigate name? Because it is really dangerous and slow to ask the dragon about the name. 200 milliseconds. And then say here Valsky this way. It looks nicer. So we have the Valsky, and here I would like to inject the layer to the dragon resource layer, and this layer investigate name. So now it could actually even work right now. Let's say what we had, dragons. I think resources are stupid. Dragons. This is no dragon. This is good. Dragon Valsky. So it works. So what's interesting now? So what I could do, I could say, okay, this is somewhat interested, but what's going on? And so I invoke that and say matrix. And what I get out of the box, Prometheus matrix, which is interesting if you have Prometheus, but if it doesn't have the Prometheus, you can go here and say -h accept application JSON, and you have it as JSON. So what's also available is matrix and application. And these are the method-specific metrics. As you can see the method boundary dragons resource get was invoked one time and two times, and it was the matrix. And if you couple the matrix with Prometheus, we have no time for that. Or if you don't ask me any questions, I could do this. And then with Kibana, Grafana, I always confuse both Grafana, then you will get on-the-fly KPIs and metrics built in. So now the next thing is, let's say I would like to configure the prefix, and the prefix is going to be prefix. And what I usually do in what I did is I used @inject and produces, no more necessary. So the default value is Mr. and the name does not matter. And I could now say this prefix plus. And we should see here null Valsky, default value, okay. Inject is still necessary. Mr. Valsky, okay, this is Mr. So, and this is actually stock Pyara 5 with stock Pyara 5. It's not even the most recent one. I actually downloaded last week the recent one, but I need in my project write this, and I was a little bit afraid before the conference to do something special. So we have the Mr. Valsky, and the cool story is how it's the default configuration is already cloud native. It looks up system.env entry and then goes, if it doesn't find anything in system.env entry, which is important for Docker and Kubernetes and cloud native and whatever, it goes to system property and fetches from system property. And you could, as the next fallback, install your own config source, which will pull that from JDBC, for instance. So now, let's say it is, of course, name investigation with dragons can go wrong. Valsky may sleep or be angry or whatever. So it could throw an exception. So, so what we do, we throw, of course, illegal state exception, and the name, and what happened is Valsky was is angry. So this is and the problem is, of course, there is no Valsky. So what do we have to do? We have to say retry, and retry, let's say 3 times, and let's say string excuse, and we can say don't ask again, And here, what I would like to do is, so we have that. And what I would like to have is a fallback. And the fallback is fallback method excuse. So now, if I do this, don't ask again, and you can see that it tried 3 times because max retries are 3. So it tries to invoke the method 3 times, gets 3 exceptions, and then goes automatically to fallback. Having said that, this with retry, you get also here the jitter and delay unit or whatever. And what you get here is we can have circuit breakers, we can have bulkheads, but this is not the point of the session. And the Dragon source returns string. And now what I would like to do is to add a little bit Java 8. And now I can say, and I will answer his question. And what I can do, we actually add the Dragon. And this is the entity. And the Dragon has name. String name, and has properly also int temperature. So now we have that. And what I could do now in Dragons, I could of course return the Dragon. And the Dragon, new Dragon. I think the first was name, and then the temperature is of course 42. So for Dragon it's cold, so no problem. So we have this, and then just try that, and we give it as JSON. This is JSON binding, and of course you can completely configure what's going on. So now, as you asked me about microprofile, I actually completely ignored microprofile for the first 2 years, and why? Because they argued, you know, we need smaller runtimes, and I measured different runtimes. If you are curious, go to my session, heavyweight versus lightweight. There's actually no measurable difference. On my podcast, I even interview one of the creators of Payara, what's actually the difference between micro and full, and there is no significant difference. So I was not really interested in having another runtime, and my clients were not interested either. But what is a genius move? What happens last year, end of last year, is the stock application servers like Payara 5, Open Liberty, and Whitefly, hopefully soon, they ship microprofile as well. So back to you. What I did actually, I used stock application server, which I always use in production. I used first microprofile features and then Java 8 features. So you can use both at the same time. And this makes it absolutely interesting because you don't have to create your own runtime to ship to clouds or whatever. And this is what I use in production actually, because I don't have to ask my clients to for permission to use an already existing API which is on the server. And this is actually not my bigger clients, and for startups, they cannot believe how productive this is. As you can see, stock Payara, there's 0 configuration of a machine, and we can just go. So, by the way, if you ask what about my Docker or stuff like that, very briefly. So what I could do is I can go to the Dragon and now say Maven clean install. Before I do this, I would like to switch to Payara 5 actually, so that you will see the same server in Docker. And the Docker file is here, and I would like to use Payara 5. It's also not the newest one. Install and docker build -t. Dragon, or no, devox pl, so like this. It's just dev. I will have to remember that. So, and this creates a full build. And as I told you, Skinny Wars. Let's check that out. So we go to target, ls alt, and you can see that whatever I did today is 7K. And this is what really my clients like, because if we push something to the cloud, we push on every commit 7 kilobytes. This is thin wars. Before the session, someone asked me whether I use thin wars in production, and actually everywhere. And one of my assignments is to remove all the dependencies and to go faster to production. So what I see is in Java EE, everyone is interested in having smaller wars. And now the question is, what happens behind the scenes? Behind the scenes, we go to dev, and what was it? Dragon, I hope. Very good. You can see 40 seconds ago, I created 7K. And 21 months ago, or 50 months ago, 200 megs operating system, 200 megs Java. This is probably Payara 5 weeks ago, can be. And there is some configuration options. But the cool story is, we create once, how big is it? We create once like 580 megs, which remains once per machine in one Docker registry. And then we build for half a year or every 3 months, we update this. But daily, we push 50 times a few kilobytes. And these are most of my projects. So we have that. Questions? We have to launch it, right? So you can say, okay, but is it also startable? Yeah, it is. So Docker run -d, let's do Docker run in detach mode, -p 8282, hopefully is free, 8080, minus the name is Dragon, dev, Dragon. Okay, the Dragon is launched. It's running. And now if we switch here and go to 8282, I just remember that, 8282, this is up and running, and here 8282, okay, also works in Docker. So this was the full deployment with and without Docker. With clouds, it would be similar experience. Now, what do you do with the front end? What I will do to save time, what I will need to save time is one additional dependency, and this dependency is coarse. And I created my coarse filter because I would like to make it more Jax's coarse, and this one. And what this is pretty simple. I show you this in a second. It just adds additional headers to HTTP, and this is required otherwise. Resources dragons. Okay, this is the slow mode because it invokes 3 times and waits 200 milliseconds. So after 1 second, I see the response. This is the reason for the slowness. But curl, as you can see, now we have the coarse headers. And this is one container request filter, so the class is simplistic. I show you the class. JAX-RS coarse, and this is exactly that. So that's all. So I guess now we have 8K war. So I would say still skinny. So, and now create the Dragon UI. Dragon UI. And this is also what we do. We kill frameworks in the front end. We have this, what I showed you in the backend. So, and the question is why we don't use a lot of framework in the front end. And the answer is because the large companies are not that interested in migrations. So I'll show you something new, hopefully. We can create a Dragon view. And this is HTML element. And this is a and I would like to call the thing dev dragon. And the dev dragon, call it here, dev dragon. As you can see, it looks like Java, and this is what I really appreciate. The longer we wait, the longer JavaScript looks like Java. So this is 2 years ago. I was absolutely not interested in JavaScript. Right now, for me, it's very similar. So we have the dev dragon, and we have, like in the backend, we have here connected callback. And this is like post construct. And what I could do here, just to test things out, I could say I would like to have the, let's say, inner HTML, and use some template, and say here, I'm hot. As I mean, this is from the perspective of the dragon, of course. So, this is dev dragon, and oh, I forgot something. What I use is browser sync, and this is basically the whole configuration. What it does, it watches the source folder and notifies Chrome. That's all. This is the only thing I use for the bottom. And you see I'm hot, and if I do here I'm not, then it's I'm not. But this is already a web component, the simplest possible. We start with that. If the project is huge, we will probably look at Polymer 3 or something like this. Fact is, all major frameworks going towards web components, React, Angular, Elements, everyone tries to achieve that. And this comes out of the box. It is mostly compatible with most of the browsers. Now let's do something different. What I would like to do is, and by the way, what we also could do is here, say this temp equals 42, or 52 is also okay. And then say here, I would like to have a little bit of interpolation. So, and you can see that it doesn't work because I forgot the super in the component. And now we have 52. So now I can say fetch or get name. So, and now is the question how to talk to the server, right? Usually in frameworks you will get 500 dependencies to invoke one GET request. And here I have to remember first this. So we need an URI. This is the most important part. And we call that. So let's do this. This is and then if this is ready, I would like, this is asynchronous call, convert that to JSON. And if this is ready, I would like to pass it to a method and say display, and this would be the message, and just go with log first, log message. And what I could do here, say then JSON should be displayed, this display and J. Display J, this get name. And then, where is then? Then, line 16, fetch and dot. So what we learn is, like in Java, dots are very important. So, you see, I got the answer from the server. So this is already my data here. And let's say I'm interested in the temp. So what I could do, so I could actually put this a little bit refactoring and say here render. This would be the Polymer methods, for instance. And say here this render. And then render again. And what I could do is I use a little bit destructuring and say this temp equals or const temp message, and of course the structuring doesn't work that way rather than this way. So, and this should be, we have to rename that temperature, this temperature. So, and the point is, what I can do right now, I'm able just to extract the temp, and I could extract the temp and message, and temp and message. This is overlap. Undefined, or was a name? Yeah. So I extracted from the JSON object on the fly this temp and the name, because in the origin message there was as key temp and name. So I defined the variables and picked the value. So and of course, to display it on the screen, what I will have to do is to say somehow this temperature equals temp, and then it should change after, yes, 42. So, and of course, this is everything done by myself. The point is, I didn't use any frameworks, any transpilation. It is all ES6, and we actually build projects based on that. It's called web components, and the cool story is what I do here is absolutely clearly defined in one resource, and this is called MDN. So if I search for MDN fetch, and MDN is like the canonical resource for all the web standards, you will find the fetch APIs and the fetch APIs. And by the way, this is Mozilla Developer Network, but Google and all the others actually agreed that this should be the canonical resource, like the the Java doc of the web standards, if you will. So this is here. So we have that. So what, of course, we could do, we could create. If you ask me, okay, what happens if I would like to do this in a different module? Let's say we would like to create another module. So it's possible. So we can do service.js, export default class service, and let's this class creates a message, return hey dragon. So, and the only thing I have to do is I have to say here type equals module. And what this does is it activates the ES6 modules. So now I can say here import service from service.js. So and then say this service equals new service. And it doesn't matter, this service dot message. So let's see. This is wrong. Also wrong. Also wrong. Hey Dragon, come from the service and switched. The cool story is now we have two HTTP requests. So we have one request and two, and there is no minification, no uglification, nothing. And the cool story is, but this is the future, with HTTP 2, the server is able to push in advance whatever the browser needs. So actually, you won't need, or you do not need, build steps or uglification, minification, concatenation in modern projects. So recently, we shipped some projects, and everyone was wondering, where is our build? But there was no build. It was an enterprise project. We could require modern browsers, so there was no build steps, which is actually faster and easier to understand. Any questions so far? So what we have one web app which communicates with hopefully skinny service, 8 kilobyte service, which emits Prometheus matrix, is cloud native, and so forth. And in the front end, we have a little app without any external dependencies, and it will run forever. So learn once, never migrate, because there are no dependencies on external frameworks. And as you know, this cannot disappear. It's part of the browser standard. Questions? Yeah, you can always create a small war. What I like the most is that the micro profile comes already with the application server, so there's nothing to do. So I mean, if there's nothing to do, it's the best, you know. Or what do you mean by you don't have to do? It's just there. Or I didn't get your question. You ask me what is the advantage of micro profile if you have everything on the class path, right? With micro profile, the application server comes with that, so there is not even in the class path. It's just part of the platform. And the main of the thin wars, the main advantages is cloud native or Docker environments, because you have base layer And what you do in production, you just create your business logic, not the infrastructure. And your war only contains the business logic. This is the advantage of microprofile in Java EE. But having that said, actually wanted to explain as well, we have Jakarta EE, Java EE, and microprofile. So what's the deal with all three? And so the deal is, last year in October, Oracle open sourced Java EE, and they call it E4J, which was a terrible name. It was an Eclipse project, and still is E4J project. This is the official project name. Not official project name. This is one name, so I always confuse what is official and what's not. And then this year they change, or the branding name is Jakarta EE, which is brilliant because there was a Jakarta Apache was the home of all Java-related servers, and the Jakarta E8 is going to be like Java EE8, but fully open source. And even Microsoft is part of the Jakarta EE consortium, so there's lots going on right now. So, and now the microprofile. So what is microprofile? Before, I was saying 1.5 years before, Oracle people stopped working on Java EE 8, it looks like from outside. And then London Java User Group, Payara, IBM, Red Hat, they created microprofile to push Java EE forward. This is not a profile, it's like ideas, what can happen in microservices with Java EE. And this is also an Eclipse project. Now we have Jakarta EE and microprofile, and the relation is the microprofile is like an incubator. They innovate really fast. What I didn't show you right now is JWT, security is really nice, and open API, so that without any annotations you get the Swagger definitions, for instance, which also really, I really hate these Swagger, you know, there's more Swagger than code, but this is also interesting. And what will happen is this microprofile will remain, this is what it looks like now, like the incubator, and Jakarta EE is the more stable platform with official profiles. And what also can happen that more and more specs and APIs from microprofile will be adopted from Jakarta EE. But what's important to me is that on stock Java EE 8 application servers, microprofile is available without any additional fiddling. So this is important for me, so that if I go to my client, I say, oh, Glassfish v5, I use microprofile, done. Because I'm not always allowed, you know, in production to change class paths or whatever. So if it comes with stock servers, this is genius. And yeah. Wildfly, they have Galleon project, I think, and they're thinking about that, because right now it's okay, Wildfly Swarm, but we should push them to do this. This is the only server which right now they don't have. They only have the JAX-RS client in the Wildfly 13, but all others are microprofile compatible. As OpenLiberty, WebSphere, so you can activate microprofile in Java 8. You have both without anything. I use it in production, so what it means. Okay, and this what I showed you right now is web components, and this is what YouTube was refactored to. So recently, last year, Google moved YouTube to Polymer 2, which is web component based. And what you get from web components, you get, Polymer, you get a template language called lit-HTML, which is even more powerful, and syntactic sugar. But the idea of the Polymer 3 Google framework is to be smaller and smaller and support more and more standards. So what's also cool here, so the call is, I could just rewrite that to this. I could say const response equals, and then I can say this is async function, and say here await, and then what I get back, I get here the response const JSON, and I'm also waiting for this, and then I can just invoke the display here. With JSON. And you see exactly the same output. And the interesting part is this returns response. This returns promise. What I wanted to say future, a promise. So you see this is promise. And why I would do this, for instance, let's say I would like to call the method twice. So what I could do now, I can say response first. So it's the second, and without await. And without await, it does it in parallel. So I get two parallel requests, and then afterwards I can just wait until they come. So it's a very similar to completable future. It is built in web standards without any additional frameworks. And so response from Java developers is they really like it. And the first time actually, you are a guru as Java developer because it looks they're actually the same concepts in browser like what we have in Java for years. We have fat arrows here. In Java, the skinny arrows, they always confuse both. Arrays are very similar in JavaScript to stream in Java, and promises is to futures. So we have even weak hash map now in JavaScript, which is very similar, of course, to weak map in weak hash map in Java as well. So we have now the components, and the one killer feature. If you don't ask me a question, I will hack something. What you could do as well is this. And this is great for performance. It's open. And instead of this, I can do this. And what you see is that there is some strange shadow root. When you ask what is actually the shadow root here, and it is like encapsulation. So why? So if we now add h2 here as well and say here Valsky, and we say h2 background is red. Now the Valsky is red, but not the 42. Why not? Because of the encapsulation. And if I will remove that and don't use the shadow root, then it breaks. So you see, now both are red. So it means the style sheet from outside can also influence components. And even worse, if I do here style h2, which is background green, both are green, and if I switch it to shadow, the one is red and the other is green. So what Shadow DOM is, the components, they have own DOM fragments, which is encapsulated. So if you include a component from outside, you cannot break layout from the outside application. So what I also see in project is the preprocessor like less and SAS to have, company-defined colors. So this times you don't need it as well. So what you could do, you could specify, for instance, here and say dev background, and this should be light blue, hopefully is there something like this, dev background. So, and now what I can do in my web component, I could say here var dev background yellow. So you see it's light blue. So the variable is defined. I'm just using this. But if I misspell the variable, so let's say it's not defined, it will fall back to yellow. So I can have standards theming which will overriding my web standards. And this is called CSS Properties. Also on web standard, it will never change. It's part of the standard. So with that, we are able to remove less and SAS. The question is, why we are removing the frameworks? Because I'm a consultant, the more framework I'm using, the more I can charge my clients. But the idea is not to charging more my clients by adding frameworks, but rather than have happy clients which are very productive. So the thinner the war in the backend, the faster the deployment times, and the less dependencies you have in the war, the less can break in production. So in my projects, I'm sometimes in firefighting mode. What it means is there are forgotten dependencies which cause some trouble. And with the thin wars, if we take a look from outside, and this is just kilobyte war, we are pretty sure there are no dependencies. The same is even more true for the web. If you have NPM project with several thousand dependencies, just install a modern framework and count the files downloaded from the internet. The question is to know how long will it take until some of the dependencies become stale. With web standards projects, the default mode is no dependencies unless you find something with really added value. And this is the mode in larger projects, what Java developers really appreciate. They don't have to relearn their skills now every other day. And it's really fun. And what I forgot to show you, a very useful tool. The question is now what I do in the airplane if I don't have the internet and I would like to look up the APIs. So there is a really useful page called devdocs.io. And this is useful, but now it looks strange. I will have to reinstall that. So what, let's see. It looks, yeah. And if I search, for instance, for DOM fetch or Windows fetch, I get exactly the same library. And the cool story is available offline. So you can install all the docs into a browser. So if you are offline, you have all the web standards built in. And of course, if you would like to use frameworks, you will have to know the basics anyway. So like the DOM API is good to know, some CSS skills. It's not like the web standards is completely hidden behind our frameworks. This is absolutely not true. So 2 minutes to go. Do you have any questions regarding web? Yeah. So different, how I would configure the URL to the backend. So there are different approaches. What the frameworks are, for most frameworks are doing, they have constants. What we are doing in the backend, the second app which I created, this app can be a war. I mean, an empty war. And what we also do in projects, if you think about this, server-side rendering. So because let's say we would like to list all dragons in Poland, right? I don't think they change too much. So there's like one in Krakow and probably other one somewhere else, but not you get every other day a different dragon. So, and this could be pre-rendered on the server. And if you think about this, we have already great rendering technology called Java Server Pages. If we not exaggerate, right? Because without logic is a great templating and very, very fast templating language. What we did is we mapped JS files to a JSP. And then you can have placeholder with the URIs. So parts of the page are served by JSPs. And into the URIs, we use CDI injection. And with the config properties, we could, this was just one-liner, we could reconfigure everything stage dependently. Because usually we have multi-stages. And this is the actually challenge. So the URI changes per stage. Because your UI in the dev stage, you will have something like http dev.devox or something, right? And int devox and then prod devox, okay? So this is, if you have Java EE, this was the simplest thing what we do, and it worked perfectly. And in one project, they didn't like to use JSPs. I don't know why they use servlets. At the end of the day, JSPs are servlets, so it doesn't matter, but yeah. Okay? Any other questions? No questions. So if you're new, there are no questions. I will spend more time in the backend. So I could show you some reactive programming with Java 8. So it's already built in, so you need a frameworks. But this is cool in conferences and less important in production. But yeah, sometimes you should do something for the conference, right? So whatever I showed you right now is what I do actually in my projects. And I also use it in production. So web components, whether we use web components with or without polyfills depends on the projects. So if you support Internet Explorer 11, we need polyfills. Some enterprise projects, we are good with Chrome. There are no polyfills, no build, nothing then. Okay, cool, no questions? Then enjoy DevOps and delete your dependencies. Be free, learn only once and never again. So then you have more time for vacations, right? And for dragons. So thank you and see you next year.